And there's some breaking news coming in at this time. China has today placed a request for a flag meeting. India has received that request. India is yet to revert to the Chinese over the time and location for this particular flag meeting that the Chinese have requested. And remember that in the current standoff, this is for the first time that China has sought a flag meeting. All right, I have with me here former Deputy Chief of the Indian Army, Lieutenant General Raj Kadian. Also with me is former Deputy National Security Advisor, Ambassador Leela Ponnappa. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining me on this particular story. We've just got word in, Ms. Ponnappa, about the Chinese asking for a flag meeting right now. I want to get a reaction from you on this and how you're reading this particular situation. It's already, been painted with a sort of political color about the photo op that happened in Delhi and the fact that the Chinese standoff still continues, apparently without end. How are you reading what's happening right now? The latest is that the Chinese have asked for a flag meeting, ma'am.
Well, flag meetings are part of the mechanisms that have been put in place in order to deal with the management of the border. This is a common practice, not just with China,
yes,
but with all countries with whom we have land boundaries. So I think it's a good thing because the whole idea is to resolve issues locally. Earlier, my information was that perhaps the issue had been jacked up to the diplomatic and the political level. But if China has now come forward with a request for a flag meeting, I think we'll have to await the outcome. But the larger picture and the larger question that you raised,
yes,
with regard to what is going on, one thing that has struck me about this incident, as against what happened last year at Dipsang, was that last year it happened sufficiently in advance of
yes,
the Chinese Prime Minister's visit for India to be able to say if there is no withdrawal from Dipsang, the visit is off. In this particular case, it happened a few days before the Chinese president's visit.
Yes.
So without going into conspiracy theories, I do see that there has been some fine-tuning on the Chinese side to, in effect, take us to have the advantage in terms of the timing as being just in advance of the Chinese Prime Minister's Chinese President's visit. Also, I think given that Xi Jinping is supposed to be such a powerful leader, head of the Central Military Commission and so on, it is unthinkable that such deployment of troops could happen without official approval,
yes,
and certainly not for this length of time. And I think this is where it's very, very important to separate the photo ops that we saw during the visit,
absolutely,
from the reality on the ground. And now we are dealing with the reality on the ground. I think China has very clear intentions of trying to change the situation on the ground unilaterally, to change the status quo if it can, in a calibrated manner. And it's not just this or the violations that take place at Pangong, but what happens all along the line of action.
Okay, it's a deliberate strategy. We're looking at the reality and dealing with it, General Kadian.
That India builds up its infrastructure and capabilities.
Yes. General Kadian, I want to bring you in on this. How are you reading this current situation? The Chinese have asked for a flag meeting right now. What does India's response need to be? And do you think that everything that has happened both politically and on the ground so far has been up to the mark as far as the situation is concerned, keeping in view that it has gone on for nearly 2 weeks now?
Yeah, the fact is that we have a disputed border with China, which we call the line of actual control.
Yes.
This kind of standoff is not the first time that has happened. It has happened earlier in Ladakh. It has
yes,
also happened in Arunachal. But the peace and tranquility that we keep talking about has never been disturbed. In the last 49 years, no shot has been fired on India-China border.
Yes.
Now, why this standoff continued despite the Chinese president being in India and despite his having, what is more surprising, when Narendra Modi raised the point, he said that in next 24 hours the Chinese army will pull back,
yes,
and actually they did not. The probability is that the Chinese president was either playing a game of duplicity with great dexterity, or there is a possibility, if not a probability, that his word doesn't count in China. Because
that's the other possibility.
Being
yes,
the president, he is also the head of the Central Military Commission.
Yes.
Now, if the Chinese have asked for a flag meeting, I see it as the beginning of the thaw. They just want to see how far India can keep their eyes wide open and not blink.
Right, right.
Last confrontation serious we had was in 1987 where China had blinked.
Yes, yes.
This again they will blink, and either they wanted to see how ready
so you're
we are.
pronouncing it as the probable beginning of the thaw. The Chinese wanted to see how far India could, keep awake in this sort of blinking match, and them asking for a flag meeting. The mechanism, as Ambassador Ponappa just described it, is the possible beginnings of the thaw. But the Chinese army has been asked to get ready for a regional war. There have been lots of different interpretations of what precisely this regional war is about. Chinese President Xi Jinping has asked the PLA to be combat ready. He said the PLA needs to be ready to win a regional war and make sure that all decisions from the central leadership are strictly followed. Xi's message to his army comes in the wake of China's repeated incursions in Ladakh and his recent trip to India. As outrage builds in India about precisely what this could mean, China has come out with a statement denying that Jinping's comment was linked to any prospective conflict with India, calling it a wild guess. But then who is the target of this apparent war cry from the Chinese president just a few days after he left India? Very quickly, Ambassador Ponappa, what do you make of this? Keeping in view all the pulls and pressures within the Chinese establishment, the relationship, between the president and the PLA, the generals, calling for loyalty. This whole business of this regional war, should it concern India, inordinately?
Well, I would assume that in any country, the instructions to the army is that they should be combat ready.
Yes.
Having said that, in terms of the current geopolitical situation, China has rising tensions, not just with India. As the general said, peace and tranquility has not really meant absolute peace in terms of such provocation. But China has problems on the maritime front, certainly seriously with Japan, with Korea, and we've seen how they have not hesitated to use force to display belligerence.
Yes.
And so I think this is really part of what the image that China is propagating of itself, that it is a muscular, rising power.
Yes.
It has absolutely no apologies for trying to stake its claim and what it calls its core interests. And it has in virtually so many words said both at official and track 2 fora that it would not hesitate to use force. So I think this is part and parcel of the Chinese discourse about itself. And I don't think we should be surprised by it, because this is the reality of China. I mean, for too long, people assume that if we have trade with China, China is going to soften up on the border. It does not follow. A country that continues to call one of India's integral states, Southern Tibet, is provoking you on a regular basis.
Yes.
And what we are seeing now, I see as a continuum of what they tried when the Prime Minister came last year.
Well, it's the simple fact of the matter is, at this point of time, the Chinese have now asked, going back to the main story, the Chinese have asked for a flag meeting. We're going to have to see whether this, as General Kadian rightly pointed out, is the beginning of a thaw, the end of this fortnight-long sort of blinking match between India and China. We're going to have to leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much, Leela Ponappa and General Kadian, for joining us on this particular discussion. Let's hope it's an end to the thaw, because at the end of the day, nobody wants conflict. India and China have a lot to do as far as their relationship is concerned. But there's a game being played here. There's a geopolitical game being played, and India needs to play it as well as it has been so far. Let's see what happens if India agrees to that flag meeting, and we'll be reporting to you first precisely when and where that will happen. General Kadian and Leela Ponappa, thank you very much for joining us.